This is going to be a quick me teach guitar because I just want to give you a couple tips and clarify a couple things. Number one, these lessons, they're not meant to be binged. I hope you are watching all of them and watching them over and over and over again so I can get all the metrics. But just like if you were taking lessons at home, you would have a lesson and you would have a week or two to work on that lesson and have a homework assignment. So I'm hoping that's how you're treating these lessons. The second lesson, the first real one after tuning, I showed you the D chord. So I'm really hoping you spent days or a week or however long it took you to figure out how to get your fingertips on the strings, how to sound each string clearly and cleanly without touching other strings and getting that muted, crappy sound. I hope you're taking your time and using a metronome and picking a nice slow speed and just working on making those chords. And then going to the next lesson, learning another chord and just making that transition. So I hope you're taking your time with all these lessons. They're not going anywhere, unless YouTube blows up, in which case we got bigger problems than my open chord lessons. So that's number one. Please take your time, practice, you gotta. It's the only way to sound good eventually. The other thing I wanted to touch on today was when you're connecting these chords, when you're making these open chords, I want you to start thinking of a concept of having an anchor finger. That's what I'm calling it, an anchor finger. So when I make that D chord, boop, the first finger that touches the neck for me, this is just how it works out, is that third finger on the third fret on the second string. Now, once that finger touches that fret and that string, my first and third fingers automatically just know where to go around my third finger, around my ring finger. That's just the way it works. If I'm playing, normally my hand will go up to the end of the neck or the beginning of the neck. This is called the nut. And it'll just sort of go up, and by now I just know where that anchor note is for that chord, and my other two fingers just fall into place. Same thing with the G. The first thing that normally hits when I play G, the first thing that normally hits is that third finger, and my first and second just know where to go after that. My version of the G, it's usually the bottom two, the third and fourth fingers hit. Those are like my anchors for the chord. When I'm doing an A chord, those are the first three I showed you, right? G, D, and A. When I'm doing my A, it's the same thing. My third finger hits. Instead of like the D chord, where it's the second string on the third fret, for the A, it's the second string on the second fret. Once that ring finger hits, my first and second fingers just sort of fall into place, and I just know where it is. I can't guarantee those are going to be your anchor fingers, but that's how I play. The other chords, E, if I'm not, I'm either going from the nut or the first fret out, or I'm going from the bottom string up. That seems to be how I form most of my chords. If I'm playing an E major, the first thing that hits is my first finger on the fourth string on the first fret. And then, it's on the third string. And then my first and second fingers just know where to go after that first finger hits. It's almost like two stages. So as you're making these chords, think about it. To go along with that, as well as practicing and having an anchor finger, also think about what fingers you don't necessarily have to lift up from when you're changing chords. If I'm playing an A, if I want to go from there to a D, my first two fingers come off, and all I do is slide my third finger up one fret. Now my anchor finger is still there, and my first two fingers can just go down. My third finger doesn't even leave the neck. It's just my first two fingers going up and then coming back down. So as you're transitioning between these chords, think to yourself, how can what is the least amount of movement possible for me to transition between some of these chords? You're going to find a lot of times there's one or two fingers that you're going to be able to leave almost on the neck and just sort of move them around a little bit. So as you're practicing nice and slow, get used to it. If you do have an anchor finger, recognize it. That's what we're talking about today. Up pops my head, which is awesome. So this was a real mellow lesson. Just wanted to reiterate a couple things and give you that concept of an anchor finger. Next lesson, we're going to get into barre chords, which is the bread and butter of guitar. So be on the lookout for that. Thanks for your time.